Can I be heard? Can I be seen?
Yes po.
Okay. Thank you for the response. So, so good afternoon, guys, and we are back in the debate competition, and it is the third round. So, for those who have been with us since the first round, thank you for your endless support. And for those who are new, witness as the different local chapters will battle it out to determine who will become the best debate team in NFJPR Region 11. There. So as you can see, guys, there are three teams currently competing in this event, and we hope that there will be more teams to come in the future debate competition. So before I will go to the rules, I would like to acknowledge the adjudicators. So first is Mr. Sean Anyo, Mr. Brian Unabia, and Miss Ashley De Harme. Thank you for accepting the invitation of becoming the adjudicators of this debate competition. And so, may konting lang akong request sa inyo, guys. Uh, I would like to ask, what preparations do you do in your when you are in the debate competition, and what goes into your mind when competing in a debate competition yan. So, for the non-debaters here in the Zoom and for the debaters to know your techniques or tips. Yan. So, if it is all right, I would like to call first Miss Ashley D. Harme to share her thoughts about it. Yan.
So what do I do to prepare?
Yes, yes.
Honestly, um, I read news articles since it's necessary for debaters to be updated with current events. So apart from like your own lectures or your own studies, you also have to be updated with news articles, not just with the Philippines but also like worldwide. And second is you just train as much as you can to prepare yourself for the competition. So, yun lang.
I see. So thank you, Miss Ashley. Yan. So narinig niyo yun, guys, ha? Yan. So next, may I call on Mr. Brian Unabia to share her thoughts about it? His thoughts about it. Sorry.
Hello, good afternoon. For me, what I do when I prepare for debate tournaments is basically I train and train and train because the secret to debating, to be good at debating, is to always like give a lot of your time, give a lot of your efforts to training because I believe that no one is born a debater, right? So all debaters are made and it's made through extensive and rigorous process of training. So I think one of the best ways for you also who are aspiring debaters to, if you want to be good at the craft, you need to train as much as you can because training is the only way for you to be able to like really immerse yourself with how debating works. And also like the and the best way to like hone these skills furthermore is to participate in as much tournaments as you can because experience, like actual and hands-on experience, are the best way for you to be able to develop your skills as debater or adjudicators. And as what Ash said, we need to read a lot of news, both local, international news. So that's it. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Brian. There. So last, definitely not least, Mr. Sean Anyo. What are your thoughts about my question? There.
Hi, thanks for having me. For me, I guess, well, aside from what Ash and Brian had already said, I always like to, what's the term? Basically, try to take inspiration from everything. So aside sa fact na, of course, you will read news and articles and all those things, I also try to see ano ba yung values not just in those news but also for example in the shows that I watch, lyrics to music I hear, um, try to see how other people are thinking about a particular issue, para naman may sort of exposure naman ako to how other people are thinking because that's what debate is. Trying to understand how other people are thinking and basically trying to improve your ability to communicate with them. And of course, don't stress yourself too much. Remember that, at the core, it's a game, so you should try to have fun. And yun lang.
See, so thank you, sir. There. So, narinig niyo yun, guys, ha? So, common sa kanilang, the common uh, gist of the response is train. And also, yun, have fun. There. Kasi, hirap naman, guys, kung sinuseryoso natin ang mga bagay-bagay. Uh, we should really enjoy what we are doing. There. Okay, so, thank you for the responses. And, yan. So, I hope that mga nagbabalak na maging debaters, yan, you have mga pabaon ng mga adjudicators natin. Yan. Okay. So I will be reading now the rules and regulations for the debate competition. There. So number 1, before every round, we will do a mic and internet connectivity test. There is a problem encountered by any of the speakers, he or she may be replaced by another student registered as a substitute. There is a maximum of 2 substitutions allowed based on IRR 4.1, paragraph 1. Once the debate has started, no substitution may be allowed based on IRR 4.1, paragraph 2. Maximum speaking time for the first 3 speakers is 7 minutes and 20 seconds based on IRR 5.7 and IRR 6.1. Based on the IRR, there will be reply speeches. Maximum speaking time for reply speeches will be 4 minutes. Based on IRR 6.2, reply speeches can only be given by the first 2 speakers of the team. So which speakers are not allowed to make the reply speeches. Number 4, based on IRR 5.7, points of information can only be launched after the first minute of the speech until the start of the 6-minute mark of the speech of the first 3 speakers. This also means that the raising of POIs is not mandatory, but is only encouraged. Please be reminded as well that POIs cannot be launched in the reply speeches. Fifth, in case one of the speakers will be disconnected in the middle of their speeches, the speaker will be given a maximum of 5 minutes to reconnect. If the speaker fails to reconnect within the given extension, his time will automatically be forfeited. The floor will then be given to the opposing side's speaker. The current speaker will only be given 3 tries to reconnect in case he or she gets disconnected multiple times during his or her speech. If the speaker gets disconnected for the 4th time, the floor will be given to the next speaker from the opposition side instead. Disconnection is not a grounds for automatic loss, and these are in accordance with IRR 5.8 to 5.12. There, so, read nyo na ang rules, guys. For the 3rd round, we have the Charm, the government side, versus the Power Rangers, the opposition side. And the topic would be, this house would set complete separation of properties as the default property regime for all marriages in the Philippines. Let us start with our first speaker, the Prime Minister of the government side. You have 7 minutes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Once again, I am Arvin Alexei Sumabal, the Prime Minister of the government team, and this House believes that the complete separation of properties should be the default property regime for all marriages in the Philippines. In our country, we have 4 property regimes established. These are conjugal property of gains, complete separation of properties, property regime of unions without marriage, and a default absolute community of property. In the latter, which was signed into law by the then President Corazon Aquino, the spouses become co-owners of properties they had separately owned at the time of the celebration of their marriage and those acquired thereafter during the course of their marriage, meaning that their their properties before and during the marriage will be treated as one. In contrast with the proposed complete separation of properties, each spouse retains individual ownership of the property that they had brought into the marriage, as well as the property they had individually acquired thereafter. So, meaning that their properties remain separate from before their marriage and during the celebration of their marriage. In case of partial separation, the property that was not agreed upon to be separate shall pertain to the absolute community of the spouses. So the following are my arguments. My first argument is that absolute absolute community I that the complete separation of properties protects the assets of the spouses. The concept of broken family is not a new concept here in Philippines. Many families experience feud in terms of claim of their properties, and I believe that in our country, where separation of marriage is a very complicated and demanding process, and where the judicial system is not that responsive, I know a lot of people just settle their affairs extrajudicially. Means separation of assets, if any, is hard to execute, at least fairly. It is undoubtedly possible that marriages, for some, are just purely for money, or it isn't what they thought to be a fairy tale, which leads to separation. And knowing our beloved country, the process of the separation is not that fast or even near normal. It's super slow and costly. If I know, we all know some couples who are separated but do not really undergo the legal process. They just separated. So since we cannot grant them separation for many, at least their assets are protected. Moreover, there are also those who have undergone an annulment process wherein a party has incurred a greater loss than the other. One famous example of a marriage that has gone the wrong way is Chris Aquino and James Yaps. In terms of those lovers who love each other, there is no problem at all because it is just the default. Before marriage, they can choose to agree whether where among the three is good. In default, there is no problem at all. They can choose to enjoy things separate or choose to make some things in absolute community. My second argument is that people are getting wiser and independent. So in in today's time, if you all notice, the past years they have been material movements as to the men that there are many women who are not dependent to men anymore. They have established their credibility to the world. They can do things that men can do, and that includes working when married. My point is they're capable of having separate properties. They should not worry about them anymore because there are laws that protects them and they're capable of being separate person having separate properties, and when this is finally imposed, this will not only apply to the date where this is signed, and all that was buried before will retain their default property regime. Lastly, my last argument, which at the same time clarifies the proper argument, our house aims to impose complete separation of properties as the default property regime. It does not necessarily mean that they should choose this regime. It is only in the absence of an agreement before the marriage that the complete separation of property prevails. But they can always choose the other property regimes that's left. So in that way, it kind of normalizes prenup. So I rest my case.
Thank you. Now, the leader of the opposition, you have 7 minutes to present your side on the matter.
Am I audible? Oh my
Yes,
gosh.
yes.
Wait lang po ha. Oh my gosh. Okay. Sorry for the inconveniency. So once again, good afternoon to the. Oh, am I audible again?
Loud and clear, yes.
Okay, thank you, thank you. So, once again, good afternoon to the respected speaker, cautious timekeeper, honorable judge, members of the government team, and members of the floor. I would like to formally introduce myself as the leader of the opposition side. The motion for today's debate is this House would set complete separation of the properties as a default property regime for all marriages in the Philippines. As a leader of the opposition, I first would like to say we disagree with the government definition. However, we strongly disagree because it seems like they are playing safe, only degrading the purpose of the absolute community and other regimes of property. So we, the opposition side, would like to turn the table and would actually firmly allege that we don't totally disagree with the complete separation of properties for all mergers in the Philippines, but should not default properties regimes. In a way of agreeing the settlements that promulgates the betterment policy on the right to choose for married couples. On the contrary of Philippine code in married couples, there are three regimes, right? So you all know about that. So upon dissolution of the marriage, the benefits obtained by the either or both spouses shall be divided equally, unless otherwise agreed in the marriage settlements. The government side, Mr. Chair, failed to discuss that we have this called prenuptial agreement, wherein we must not ignore giving them the floor to decide settlements of agreement. However, if one does not agree to the terms and condition, well, that's the time of cancellation or pursuance depend on the court, including the complete separation of property regimes. But when they failed to comply with this agreement during the celebration of their marriage, we must still have to follow protocols to organize and justify both parties rather than to default it. Now, I will proceed to refute two arguments made by the Prime Minister. First argument is yes, it will be costly, but the fact for the common good of both married couples because the law is actually ensuring the financial assistance. And for the second argument, refute, but there are instances that it will be lack financial assistance if the child will live with
Yo,
a
ay,
mother's
ma'am.
house.
Excuse me.
Later, please. So for the third argument, if the absence of agreement, there must still be protocols will sooner be discussed. I will sooner be discussed. So now moving on, let's proceed to my first argument that there are possible dangers that may arise with the married couple with a default of property regimes. Despite the fact that a couple may be legally separated and living apart, if the couple has joint financial accounts, each spouse will no longer have access to those joints, and one may be held liable for the couple payments or unsettled debts. For example, an elite married couple in Makati rather moved to the United States of America to start putting up another branch of their company. Life became tricky. They agreed to separate from properties, and however, the husband has unsettled transactions to separate from properties. However, properties under the name of his wife authority. Consequently, when they separate legally, the wife is accountable and liable. So in this case, we can see that the wife is fully at stake, unaware of unsettled accounts made by the husband and is not anymore accountable for further debts and may be threatened by syndicates. In other some ways, we have the second danger wherein whoever requests for legal separation along with the complete separation of properties will be accountable for providing danyas. I hope that you will be familiar with this. It is also mandated by the law that alimony law provides the rules for awarding financial support to one spouse following a separation. However, Mr. Chair, for example, one spouse may leave the marriage with significantly greater earning capacity. The first spouse who requests for separation is still liable to pay support. In this way, it may in this way it may actually have it may exploit and not be able to provide an adequate alimony amount. That's why we have to make sure the settled transactions in the agreement or protocols. We are in the democratic country, so why we would constrict the freedom to choose what regimes to follow on the separation, because law aims to set standards for the good of all. So if this default will be imposed, then the ultimate goal of law will be explicitly useless. And now for my last set argument is the future of the child custody after the separation might be at risk.
Yo, ay, ma'am.
Later, please. We all know that it needs to pertain to the legitimate child after a married couple separate shall provide child custody. It is very important regardless of the separation because it may fall to child abandonment. If you fail to assess the child's custody using assets of the property, however, it may create conflict of interest, especially in the first class, having an affair with another family. In result, there will be a division of properties and attention of the child. The property that may be owned by the child will be put into waste for it lack guidance and presence of the both parties. In some instances, in second and third classes, not all are like the elite ones who can raise their child on their own. Nonetheless, if a poor or a middle family whose income is between 20 to 50,000 or below, well, child's custody will be at risk. Why? Because it will be divided in half as doubled of their income until it cannot sustain child needs due to lack of financial assistance. So, with regards in this matter, with setting standards and protocols to call out for their freedom to choose both of married couples, there may be separate, yes, legally, but the responsibility of both party is a must. That's all. And the third and fourth argument will be sooner discussed of the deputy leader of the opposition. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. So let us now hear from our second speaker, the Deputy Prime Minister of the government side. You have 7 minutes.
Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Marriage, I believe, is the union of vows, not the union of assets. If you truly love, don't you trust your partner enough? Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon once again. I am Christine Joy Balubalo, the Deputy Prime Minister from the House of the Government. Before I begin my argument, I would like to mention the flaws that the House of the Opposition have stated. First one, the House do not disregard the other regimes. I will elaborate this further on. Second clause, the Prime Minister did not mention that separation of property is costly. What the Prime Minister said is that separation of couple is costly. Actually, separation of property is the least expensive because you are already exclusive. Another one from the point of the deputy of the opposition side, she stated that the law is useless. How come and why did you say that the law is useless? For the fourth law, the deputy said that there is separation. The deputy said that the children can be abandoned. However, there is a separate right for the children and the right for the spouses. Now I will go on and explain why the House will set the given motion. I have 3 points of argument to be given. First one, money, treasures, nor any form of asset is not the main reason why spouses are married, but because of love, affection, and passion. It would have a very positive impact both between the spouses for the reason that we can avoid the bad intention in marriage that spouses only after the riches and not the real reason of marriage, which is love. For example, Enrico Tabag, a CPA, author of a tax book, he and her wife applied separation of properties so that rewarding and giving each other and vice versa really came from their own pocket and they can claim that it came from their own property. It is sweeter as a couple, right? Second point, easier decision making in terms of your property. It would be lesser hassle if the spouses have separated property because they can do anything, whatever they want, according to their will without the consent of their partner. Article 145 stated that each spouse shall own, dispose of, possess, administer, and enjoy his or her own separate estate without the need of the consent of the other. To each spouse shall belong all earnings from his or her profession, business, or industry, and all fruits, natural, industrial, or civil, or received during the marriage from his or her separate property. Remember that not all spouses are living together. Some are working abroad, and also some have their own reasons. That creates a big reason why we should implement complete separation of properties as default property for all marriages.
Hello.
Take note of the word default. The House is not forcing every spouse to apply this absolutely.
Sorry. Hello. Sorry to cut you off, but one of the judges just got disconnected.
Okay.
So let's just give her a couple of minutes to connect back. You can start again at the point where she got disconnected, which is, where was that point? Let's just ask her when she gets back because she's the last one who can determine where
I'm having
she
some
got
trouble with the
disconnected.
connection.
Yeah, sorry about that, but let's just wait
Okay,
for her to come back. Thank you.
that's not a problem.
Okay, so we'll be waiting for the judges or one of the judges, Miss De Harme, to come back. Okay, okay. And so mahirap talaga guys, basta internet connection. Yun talaga ang one of the difficulties in sa pag-conduct ng ano guys, online events. So, yan. Okay. Hmm. Okay, so I'll be asking guys if some organizers if they can contact Miss De Harme if what's her status currently. Okay, so we'll wait muna guys. Okay, so I guess if while waiting, I would like to ano muna, interview some of the ano participants, non-debaters or debaters in this ano so while waiting. So, and so Tony Reese Arguelles, nandiyan ka ba Tony? And
Hello, Chags.
so is this your first time attending this debate competition? And
Um, First time na ako mag-watch og full na debate jud. So, yeah, very interesting.
thank you Tony. So Tony is one of my executive committee members and she is here to observe and experience firsthand and what is happening in the debate competition. Online pa. Yan. Okay, so nandito na ba si Ma'am De Harme? Ayan. So one of the judges has connected. Okay.
Hi,
There.
apologies for disconnecting. The last thing that I heard from the Deputy Prime Minister was that their Prime Minister said that the separation of the couple is costly, not the separation of property. That's the last thing that I heard.
Okay, so thank you, Ma'am. Okay, thank you, Miss. And the speaker can now continue in expressing her side.
Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Before I continue, can I clarify that the time, where did I stop or where did the point taken? Excuse
I
me.
think it was I think it was like around 2 minutes and 30 seconds. So I would say na just okay, I didn't hear anything after what I said after the clarification that you made. So if you could just go back to discussing whatever I missed, and I'll just reset your timer to like I'll give you like 5 minutes to discuss for it.
Okay, thank you po.
Thanks.
So as I continue, I am stating here the flaws that the House of the Opposition have stated. The Prime Minister did not mention the separation of property is costly, but what the Prime Minister said is that the separation of couple is costly. Actually, separation of property is the least expensive because you are exclusive already, you are already separated. Another flaws that the House of the Opposition have stated is the law is useless. How come that the law is useless? On the other hand, it is very useful. Fourth flaws that the House of the Opposition stated is there is the there is no the children have no right because uh, on the separate property because they can be abandoned on that regime. On the other hand, there is a separate right for children and the right of the spouses. So we cannot say that the children can be abandoned because they have their rights. Okay, now I will go on and explain why the House will set the given motion. I have 3 points of argument to be given. First one, money, treasures, nor any form of asset is not the main reason why spouses are married, but because of love, affection, and passion. It would have a very positive impact both between the spouses for the reason that we can avoid the bad intention in marriage that spouses only married because they after the riches and not the real reason of marriages, which is for love. For example, CPA Enrico Tabag, the author of a textbook, he and her wife applied separation of properties so that rewarding and giving each other and vice versa really came from their own pocket and they can claim that it came from their own property. It is sweeter as a couple, right? Another one, another argument is easier decision making in terms of your property. It would be lesser hassle if the spouses have separated property because they can do anything, whatever they want, according to their will without the consent of the partner. Article 145 stated that each spouse shall own, dispose of, possess, administer, and enjoy his or her own estate without need of the consent of the other. To each spouse shall belong all earnings from his or her profession, business or industry, and all fruits, natural, industrial, or civil, or received during the marriage from his or her separate property. Remember that not all spouses are living together. Some are working abroad and some have their own reasons. That creates a big reason why we should implement complete separation of properties as default property for all marriages. Take note of the word default. The House is not forcing every spouse to apply this absolutely. Absolute is different from default. It will be taken into consideration only when a couple does not choose any from the other regime. Because as what I have said, not all couple are living together. Third point, in innate close family ties of the Filipinos. According to study, 57 to 65% of the married Filipinos still stay on their parents' roof. 75% of the married couples still support their parents on their daily needs. It is innate within our culture to stick with a Filipino extended family. As for example, the wife's mom needs some financial support. Remember that the wife is not just a wife. Her being daughter does not end the moment she was married. So she will still support her mom financially. Mostly, that was the grounds of every couple to argue. So for longer and peaceful relationship, the House strongly believed that complete separation of properties should be implemented as default property regime for all marriages in the Philippines. I rest my case.
Thank you. So now, the second speaker, the deputy leader of the opposition side, will have 7 minutes to present his or her side. The deputy leader of the opposition side can now speak.
Wait lang daw po sir kasi loading po.
I see. Okay, okay.
Hello, am I heard? Hello?
Can you read the
Yes.
motion for us so we can test if your
This
connection is
house, this house would set complete separation of properties as the default property regime for all marriages in the Philippines.
okay. You're clear.
Okay na po.
Yes, yes.
Okay, I'll just set the timer. Okay, one, two, three. Ladies and gentlemen, in a democratic country, setting a default property regime would make systems and processes uniform. However, this shouldn't be used in altering the right of the married couple in choosing the most suitable property regime for them. The government side has been playing safe as called out by our leader of opposition and they have a confusing definition on what default term is referring to and it was clarified that the default term means that the complete separation of properties is the property regime for all marriages regardless if they did prenuptial agreement or not. I'm going to give extensions as to why having a default would open more cases of exploitation. Not having a default allows them to have the freedom to choose a property regime for them. But first, let me engage with the points of the previous speaker. The government side has been very inconsistent when they said they don't degrade all other property regimes, but most of their arguments state the benefits of the complete separation regime. On the first
POI, ma'am.
premise, the previous speaker said that this isn't a question whether or not a couple trusts each other or the reasons or the measure of love and care. This debate, however, our side says that this debate is about the property regime that will enable the marriage to manage their funds as a binded citizens. And even if this is true, this measure to which there is a default, this measures of love and care doesn't measure why we should decide for a default marriage in all marriages, default regime for all marriages. And even if this is true, our side takes a better position because we think that by not having a default, we it would cater marriages who wants to establish other property regimes. And the second point that I'm going to rebut is that the government side neglects the fact that there are circumstances to which property exploitation happens in their cases, which is false. That we think the main reason why we have property regimes is that we are able to manage these cases of exploitation. And even if this is true, it seems like property exploitation never happened, and that how these property regimes, what is now the purpose of these property regimes and how they are going to resolve this matter. And that even if this is true, our take sides better position because by not having a default, we can settle an agreement for both of these people and not coerced by the law. Now to my arguments. First is that by not setting the complete separation property regime as a default and allowing them to choose over the property regime options, we preserve the right to choose. The very problem in this debate is that the term default is that it doesn't preserve the best interest of everyone. We cannot deny the fact that there are marriages to which they prefer a different property regime, a conjugal one or absolute one, or even a complete separation one. Why so? Well, it is true that individuals do bear separate endeavors and capacities, but properties for the purposes of sharing and value realization can be shared between individuals who have established their union through marriage. At the end of the day, it always falls on the discretion of the married couple on which property regime they wanted. Example, a married couple who wishes to have a conjugal property regime where each other's properties remain theirs as a couple. Now, if the law sets it as a default and now they are forced to choose a complete separation, what does this imply? The law now intervenes to something into which they had the right to choose in the very first place. What we're trying to prove here is that the property regime is an option to which married couples are in the place to decide into and not coerced by the default property regime. So what we are giving importance to decision making and processes and plans of these married couples, and the default may be advantageous to those couples who choose complete separation at first. But what about the rights of the marriages who wanted other property regimes? We think that it is important to stick to the status quo and retain the proposition that we have to make this married couples decide on which property regime that they are going to manage. Second is that the government's case is opening more cases of the property exploitation. Why so? Ladies and gentlemen, by making it a default, that is when we fully realize that there is a property exploitation problem in the status quo, that it is a norm now to expect exploitation in the marriage. That is when we realize that we need to take measures in addressing this matter. However, our side says that property exploitation can still happen in their side because, for example, our partner can then induce violence and harassment for the other partner to get all the properties to make use of it. What's more detrimental is that the exploiting partner can defend by saying at the end of the day the transactions were made under the name of the exploited partner. What we're trying to prove here is that the government's case is just another futile attempt in addressing property exploitation at hand. It even shows a wrong notion that the only way to address the matter is through interfering with their decision. Now, so what? Now, in their case, the exploiting partner can easily steal or take advantage of the default property regime. It is now more difficult for the law to deal this matter because by the books, we tolerated separation as a default. We tolerated that everything is transacted separately, even if in reality it was out of exploitation and harassment. The opposition side stands that having a default property regime will only be harmful for all marriages in the Philippines. Instead of making a default one, why don't we reinforce laws that actually deal property exploitation matters at hand? We have anti-violence laws and other property rights and constitution that deal with this matter. At the end of this debate, not only that we are dealing with properties and claims, we are also in quest of allowing them to pursue a property regime that they wanted, and to also address the case of property exploitation, the deemed problem in this debate. The burden now of the government side is to explain to us what is the likelihood of their property regime to be default for all marriages. How will they go over and govern extreme cases of property exploitation in this matter? And for all of these reasons, we're planning to oppose. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, the third speaker, Government Whip, will have his 7 minutes to speak.
So hello, good day. I am Margentilia, the government whip of this house, which agrees to set the complete separation of properties as a default property regime for all marriages in the Philippines. But before I will start my supporting arguments, for our stand, I would like to lay down my rebuttals first. So first is the child abandonment. Bearing a child is a responsibility for both spouses. So we do not think that these spouses will abandon that responsibility, not to mention the separate clause mentioning the rights of the heirs to their parents' properties. The next rebuttal is about the government playing safe with regards to this default marriage regime. Again, just like what my prime minister and my deputy prime minister have said, we are repeating again and again that this is just a default. We are not forcing every marriage to choose the complete separation of properties, but in the absence of stipulation, they will and the law will apply this marriage regime. And the last one is options. Again, we are not shutting options for all couples. We wanted them, and even we promote that they will do marriage arrangements if they want to, depending on their agreement with each spouses. So moving on to my supporting arguments. So I have three. We believe that this is only right and just. The next one is it is to protect the people. And the last one is we are not hindering the spouses their freedom to choose. So we are not jinxing all the couples that are not able to prepare for nuptial agreements by making complete separation of assets as the default marriage regime that eventually they will separate soon. But we are giving them an option that if in its slightest possibility that their marriage would go the wrong way and it would be hard for them to fix it, then they will not separate thinking that they lost something because all their properties will be protected. The next one is it is to protect the people. As the government, it is the duty to protect the people. By implementing this house believes that it is the best marriage regime to protect its people as its greatest role. So putting break-even situation in marriage will give a common ground for both spouses. Taboos like marrying someone just for wealth will be prevented as well. And the last one, we are not hindering the spouses their freedom to choose again and again. Technically, the couples are free to choose among their options, which they seem fit. So if they are confident enough that the relationship would last until death do us part, like how their vows say, then they may choose any of the following options and include it in their marriage arrangements. By imposing this, we are only giving them a safe ground of not gaining and not losing at the same time. So to summarize our points, we agree of making complete separation of properties as the default marriage regime in our country. This is to protect the interests of both spouses by securing their assets as the role of the government to protect its people from any possible loss. And if and only if the marriage will go the way they did not expect. So that would be all. Thank you.
Thank you. May we now have the third speaker, the opposition whip. You have 7 minutes.
Wait. I'll start in three, two, one, go. Yours, mine, ours. The idea of taking away the freedom for the couples to choose regarding their right to choose if they would prefer to have other property regimes and making complete separation of properties as the default property regime for all marriages in the Philippines is precisely the kind of despotic mindset the opposition would want to get rid of. This is outright offensive to the existence of prenuptial agreements and the other property regimes wherein couples are free to choose whether what they want. Making complete separation of properties as their default choice is eradicating the idea of their right and the idea of marriage. Moreover, to summarize what transpired in this debate, the Prime Minister of the government side has provided us with arguments that firstly, the complete separation of properties protects the assets of the spouses. Secondly, people are getting wiser and independent. Thirdly, they also gave us an argument that their house imposes that it does not necessarily mean that couples will choose and limit couples choices to choose or make complete property separation as default choice. On the other side, the opposition bench, our bench, gave us arguments with leader of the opposition saying that firstly, there are possible dangers or threats that may rise with the married couple after a complete separation of properties. Secondly, the future of the child custody after separation might be at risk, with my deputy leader of opposition saying that firstly, by not setting a default, we allow the couples to choose a property regime that is best fit them. Secondly, by setting a default, we are opening more cases of property exploitation. Now, the government bench discussed at length how and why complete separation would benefit married couples more in terms of their properties, assets, and such. But they stopped short of explaining how this complete separation would affect the couple's health and welfare and such as a whole. In closing, we were the team who answered the so what question as to which regime couples can practice more their freedom, and secondly, in which regime are better off with a better governing body. Now, the leader of opposition was the person who explained to you that danger are imposed with having complete separation as a default property regime for marriage, for there may be instances that couple has joint financial accounts and wherein each spouse will no longer have access to those joint accounts and may be held liable for the couple's payments or unsettled debts. Furthermore, it was my deputy leader of opposition who considered about the welfare of married couples as to their freedom to choose what is best fit for them. Allow me to refer to an example. Couples have the right for prenuptial agreement, yes, as stated by the law, wherein they can set as to what property regime to the extent of their properties would best benefit them and themselves as a married couple also. In instances that they fail to set the property regime for their properties, it is in the minds of this couple that the moment they get wed is they are going to share the properties each have before and acquired thereafter, which is much to their benefit as this is the absolute ground for marriages, ladies and gentlemen, to start and be the sole ground and strength of their family as it was supported by the family code. Therefore, there will be a regime wherein married couples would achieve their right for an absolute ground, their right to choose, and their right for freedom, and where the law is better acted upon. This analysis is key to showing why making complete separation a default property regime for marriages are significant in harming the end goals of the opposition bench, which the government team was unable to set or prove. Moreover, this analysis is saying that we are not against the idea again of complete separation of properties, but we condemn the idea of making it as the default. I will forward two main rebuttals, namely why the government's proposal is ineffective and vague. The government is claiming that their policy will be effective because married couples will be able to protect their assets and spouses. In fact, ladies and gentlemen, we tell you that this is not true. In fact, this policy is likely to be ineffective, for it promotes the idea of individualism, which may cause greater harm to the marriage as it promotes the idea of separation. If we make the complete separation property, we romanticize the idea of having to be married because of the assets. Allow me to refer to an example. The moment complete separation of property becomes a default regime property, a married couple might eventually think that it is okay for them to go separate ways, as there will be no burden, as their assets or their property are not as one or is not unified. Having a lot of having that case, it will cause a lot of aftermath, such as we can consider the welfare of their children, which will inevitably affected by the situation of their separation of their child. And in the opposition bench, we condone such belief. Now, furthermore, the government bench claims that their house imposes that it does not necessarily mean that couples will choose, and that they are not limiting couple to choose complete property separation. However, ladies and gentlemen, their end goal in this sense is vague, as they as what their two speakers are saying a while ago. They are straying away to the issue in this debate on whether should it be default or not, and as to where the married couple is better off and such. And furthermore, the government bench have failed to put their arguments in relevance to the motion. They aren't confused of how default is used in this motion, and the definition of default in their case was just mentioned, and the definition of the default in their case was just clarified by the government whip in the end, which does not go with their arguments, and it's actually counterproductive in some ways in the analysis and arguments of their first two previous speakers, as their motion is actually wanting to have the best of two worlds, which is different from their end goal. Now, to conclude, it is obviously the government bench who answered the issues of this debate and provided a better paradigm for the married couple where they can practice their right, and which paradigm better suits them, in which the government was unable to prove. And for all of these reasons, and as we want to get rid of this despotic mindset we all have, I am proud to oppose.
Thank you. So may I call on the opposition? They will present their side and will be given 4 minutes to reply.
Okay, I'll start the timer in 3, 2, 1, go. We are in a constituted era where matters are held by the law. Ladies and gentlemen, I am very disappointed as to how this debate flowed in a matter. In the very first place, the government side has failed to frame and contextualize this debate according to their will. It is up until their government whip was able to clarify everything. Now, on the and the previously it has to be assumed by the opposition side. Now, both teams agree, as we assume, that the very end goal of this debate is to provide the marriages a good policy that will cater their needs and avoid cases of exploitation. And both teams agree, as assumed in this debate, is that whether or not we are going to have, whether or not the default will be the complete separation, where in fact on the law that we now have, we have other property regimes options. Nevertheless, both teams differ in imposing the regime. The government side wishes to make a default property regime, but the opposition side says we needed to stick to the status quo, and that there the status quo of the using other property regimes. There will be two standards on evaluating this debate. First is that which regime are couples better off, and second is that which regime expectation is more manageable in a sense of default complete separation or not. Okay, on the first standard is that which regime those couples are better off. And then on the best interest of the couples and the government side, they have said that assets are taken care by their own, and that it and as explained by the previous speakers, it falls on the concept of individualism and knowing the nature of default, meaning that it has it's the nature in which the couples have left with no choice, is that it is it's already the default of no, whenever they did not agree or not agree on the prenuptial agreement, and that with having this as a default, it would clearly mess up the system. It would confuse them because we are now changing the system. It would now give a confusion to the to the marriages system in our country. And the opposition side says that if we retain the status quo, we are giving them the right the right of choice and their prenup agreement, and that if they fail to have the prenup agreement, we are going to stick with the status quo that either they have the conjugal or the absolute one. Why is this so? We wanted this one because it is what the system is already prevailing. It's what the system that is already propagating, and that all marriages are already aware of this. And if we have to change the system, it would cause confusion in the society. And then second standard is that which regime expectation is more manageable in a default or not. I'm going to make an analysis in this, and that in short term, we do agree that separating properties by the books can portray that the policy cares about exploitation and joint properties, but in the very long term, an exploiting partner can still manage to exploit a partner whenever he or she wants to, even more jeopardy, because they just have to steal these properties and take advantage of it, because they feel more comfortable that by the books it is still under the name of the exploited partner. It is when we go back to the law, it seems like it's still under their name. At the end of this debate, it's only the government side who responded to the needs of the debate. It's through our side where we allow these marriages choose a property regime that will best suit the agreement and where exploitation is more manageable one. In circumstantial cases, with not having a default property regime, with not having a we think that it is through our model we best address the standards. And for all of these reasons, opposition will take this round. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Now may I call on the government's reply? You have 4 minutes.
Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Okay. According to Merriam-Webster Dictionary, default means a selection made usually automatically on without active consideration due to lack of a viable alternative. Again, this is the reason why the government should win this argument. As a government, we wanted to protect the people by protecting their assets and preventing its losses. Imposing this, the government doesn't mean that the government will disregard the right of the spouses to choose among the three options, but we would like to impose to change the current default, which is the absolute community of property, into complete separation of property. We, the government side, is also disappointed as well that the three speakers of the opposition house failed to recognize the word default. No matter what you say, the House will still strongly believe that our arguments are valid and theirs are not. That completely separation of properties should be implemented as default property regime for all marriages in the Philippines, just in case as spouses do not recognize other regime. We rest our case. Thank you.
Thank you. So, thank you all very much. And may we now invite both sides to cross the house as our judges will tally the scores. There. So, thank you for the participants, debaters, and the local chapters for participating in today's debate cup. So, our NFJP Region 11 Vice President for Non-Academics, Alexa, has sent me a message because she is having a difficult time connecting in Zoom. So this is her message for us. So before we end today's activity, we would like to recognize once again our adjudicators for today's event, our moderator, our local chapter participants, the Region 11 executive officers, and also the regional executive officers from Region 10, especially Mr. Leandro Palma for helping us in today's event. There. So the Region 10 helped us in establish for the Zoom account there because they made it possible for us to have a live stream on Facebook there. Thank you. And that's it for the message of Alexa Manggubat. And now for the important reminders. We will not announce the results after the round, and all the results will be announced after round 3, now this afternoon. And the top 2 teams will be declared after the announcement of results. And rollouts for the sides will also be done this afternoon. And the motion for the grand finals tomorrow will be pre-released this afternoon. There. So, as you can see in the screen, round 1, Power Rangers versus the Catalyst. Round 2, the Catalyst versus the Charm. And round 3, Charm versus Power Rangers. There. So, once again, guys, thank you everyone. And hope to see you on Sunday there for the final round of the Debate Cup. And so, before kayo guys, ex, uh, exit, we will have a picture taking muna. Yan. For documentation purposes. There. Okay, so may I request everyone to open their cameras so that we can see your beautiful and handsome faces. Yan. So show us your beautiful smiles. So I will be taking the picture. There. So smile na tayo, guys. The debate has ended. Okay. So we are 16 in the Zoom. Oh, so tama na. Okay, so there. Okay, sige. So open our cameras. Sige, so sino bang di mo nag-open dyan? So nakikita ko ba lang sa aking screen is sina Christine Joy, Athena, Alyssa, Sofia, si Marge, and Arvin. Yan. So ang iba dyan, ayaw nyo sali. Yan. Okay, na si Nyla, si Claire, si Tony. Yan. There. Yan, so I'll be taking 2 shots, guys. 2 shots. There. Okay. Okay, so I guess na ito lang yata ang mga tao na gusto mong picture. Okay, so ready, guys? So 1, Nyla, balik na sa frame. 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay, so last shot. Last shot tayo, last shot. Yan. Okay, 1, 2, 3, smile. Yan. Okay, so thank you all. And God bless. Once again, I'm Joshua Noel Bichagan, your host for this 3rd round. Thank you.
Thank you everyone. Thank you din po.
So thank you guys. So if you want to watch again the debate competition, you can go to our FB page, NFJPR Region 11. Ayan. So don't forget to follow and subscribe, to like and follow our page, guys. Ayan. Okay.